when you are a qualified accountant and you're trying to upskill to maybe even a CFO in a startup, it can be really challenging balancing life and study. And so I wanted to talk to you today about a few strategies and things you may want to think about when learning as an accountant working for a startup or scale up. Hi, my name's Alysha Randall and I am a fractional CFO, and I also train new and aspiring CFOs within startups and scale ups. And today I just wanted to talk about that balance between life and study. So, a few practical tips on how you can balance life and study and areas worth looking at. I want to stress though that even when you become a CFO, your learning doesn't really end there. So I look at new ideas, I look for new strategies, I keep updated with industry news, particularly with regulations and also automations. So looking at different software, different AI that's been introduced, lots of different things, and the learning never stops. It probably stops maybe when you retire. So it is always going to be part of your role. So even though, particularly if you've just recently become qualified, you just want to throw your books out the window and never think about studying again, because it can be quite tough, especially university and then a qualification. It can be really hard. But ultimately, having good habits with study is really important. I know I certainly learned the hard way. I also, with one of my first leadership roles, I was so involved with the role, I actually didn't really spend much time at all learning, and I had to really catch up when I realized my mistake. So a few tips is time management. So I have talked many times about blocking times in your calendar. So I do that for strategic thinking, I do that for reviews, but I also do it for study and reading time. So really allocate some slots in your week recurring that are dedicated for studying, whether it's a specific course or just reading and researching. So I personally have 2 1-hour slots in my diary for learning or reading. I've moved these times around the calendar for when it best suits me, both from energy and the ability to focus, but also thinking about my workload. Prioritizing tasks. So if you're working on a course or if you have to upskill on something quite quickly, it's making sure that you cover those essential areas first, without getting overwhelmed. So as I said, if you're studying a qualification, or in my case, I had to upskill quite quickly for something with business needs. So I remember working for my first ever fintech, I had to learn very quickly about what FCA regulation meant, what CAS requirements or client monies requirements meant. And so that was my focus, and everything else was put to another day. Setting realistic goals. So particularly if you've signed up to a lot of different resources, such as my weekly blog post, for example, it's really easy to just feel a bit overwhelmed. We are in the information age where there is so much information out there, but just try and be realistic about how much you can take on. Because it's a never-ending process, you don't have to upskill on every single topic at all times. I personally have a folder in my inbox. It is called Reading. And essentially, generally when I come in on Monday, my inbox can be full of articles and blog posts that I want to read. What I do is I just move them into that folder. And then when I have my allocated time, I just go to that folder and I pick out what I want to read next. I am one of those people that hates an inbox that gets out of control. If it's more than 50, which means it gets to 2 pages, I feel anxious. So this is why I move all of those things into a folder. It's what works for me. Using your downtime wisely. So, if you're commuting a couple of days a week or 5 days a week or 1 day a week, it's a good time to either read articles, listen to blog posts, review notes. I personally use audiobooks so I can get through my business books while commuting. It's much easier for me personally to read a book because I have a 20-minute walk to the station and I often need to change trains. And obviously when you're walking, you're not reading a book, but you can listen to one. And then stay organized. So keep all your study materials organized, saves time and reduces stress. So areas that you could study on thinking post-university. So the first one obviously is an accounting qualification. It's essential, it's foundational. You basically have to have it if you want to be a finance leader. So if you haven't yet, consider things like ACCA, CIMA, or ACA to just get that foundation in place. Everything else should be ignored until you've got that qualification. Other areas to look at, of course, is our Financial Leadership Fundamentals program. So you can enroll in this program. It'll give you the skills you need to be a finance director or CFO in a startup or scale up. It covers things such as adding value, fundraising, and leadership. So you can have a look at more details on that program. Other areas you can look at is industry and subject matter blogs. So I would encourage you to follow industry blogs or subject matter specifically from experts so that you can stay updated on the latest trends and best practices. This will just, make sure that you keep informed. Other things I recommend is reading books, whether it's on finance, but perhaps more leadership and that startup culture specifically. I do have a list of books that I recommend, so I'll leave a link for those and you can have a look at that. And then also networking. So lots of networking events will often have a particular subject matter that will be discussed by a panel, for example. So it's a good way of learning, but also you're building those connections and learning from your peers. I recently did a post on networking, so feel free to have a look at that on tips to network better. And then finally, fitting study days into a business day. So don't necessarily need to do all of these things, but choose ones that may work for you and then include that within your routine. So early morning sessions, you can start the day with an hour of study before heading into work or before logging in. This can be really highly productive, particularly if you have kids. I'm currently writing a book, and on days that I'm working from home, I like to have this 1 hour first thing in the morning. It's before I shower, before I eat breakfast, after coffee. But it's amazing how much you can get done in the hour, particularly if it's part of your daily routine. Lunch break. So you can use, say, half of your lunch break for a quick study session or just to catch up on industry news. I don't necessarily advocate sitting at your desk for your whole lunch break. It's essential to go for a walk. I personally go for a 30-minute walk every day during my lunch. Sometimes though I might use it to listen to a podcast. And then when I'm eating, if I'm not eating with people or eating, want to eat at a table, then I may eat in front of some articles. And then if you've got more of a course or something a bit more intensive to go through, obviously evenings, you can dedicate an hour or two in the evening to review study materials or look at things that you've learned throughout the day. Personally, I like to use from 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. So after the kids have gone to bed, it's enough time for me to squeeze a bit of downtime before my bedtime. I absolutely wouldn't encourage you to do this every evening. Once or twice a week though is enough, unless of course you are trying for a qualification and you have an exam imminently, then potentially more often than that. Weekly weekend intensive. So if you want to focus on something that's a bit of a larger topic and you want to have a look at it in depth, you may want to schedule something on the weekend. Personally, Saturday mornings or Sunday afternoons are my preference if I really want to cover something off. Again, I wouldn't recommend doing this every weekend, but if there is something, again, that you want to focus on, then potentially using some of your weekend can be useful. And then finally, study groups. So you can join or form study groups or networking groups or with colleagues or peers. This obviously helps with the learning, also helps with motivation and support. So that would be my recommendations, my learnings, my experience, my way of doing things. Not as prescriptive, but just kind of ideas for you to mull over, but you really do need to balance life and study, balance life and learnings. It's very much like introducing an exercise routine, small habits bit by bit, and then it becomes part of your routine. So following some tips or focusing on areas that you want to study or areas you want to learn. Again, learning never stops. Even when you've been a CFO for a few years, you have to keep studying. So they're my recommendations. If you are a new or aspiring finance leader within startups or scale-ups, then this is the channel for you. This is exactly what I talk about every single week. I have a huge amount of resources that I'll link below. And don't forget to subscribe so that you get this video next week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.